Okay. Hi, Robert. Welcome back.
Thank you so much, Doug. I'm delighted to be back. Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. Let's see. As we were talking about before we got on, you were one of the first people on the new video edition of our show back in September of 2020. Do you remember what book you were promoting at that point?
Oh, probably in 2020 was my penultimate book, the called Quantum Night. But today we're talking, I think, about my most recent one, the Oppenheimer Alternative.
Right. It's all coming back to me now. Was your other book something about AI?
Exactly. I often
Okay.
write about that artificial intelligence. It interests me a great deal. In fact, the book I'm writing now, which hopefully we'll talk sometime in the future about, is another look at artificial intelligence. I think, one of the most compelling issues of our day.
Okay, that's what it was. Yes, I remember we got into a conversation about the Matrix and about
Yes.
Terminator and all of that. Right. Okay, so your new book or your latest book is called The Oppenheimer Alternative. This is not about AI, right?
That's right. And in fact, it's not about the future at all, even though I'm, dubbed as a science fiction writer or a futurist. This one is actually set in the past. It's about the Oppenheimer of the title is J. Robert Oppenheimer, who was the scientific director of the Manhattan Project. 80 years ago this year, the Manhattan Project was founded to try to create the world's first atomic bomb. And of course, the reason that we're being interviewing each other or talking today in English instead of Japanese or German is because Oppenheimer and his crew succeeded in creating that bomb.
Okay, but your book is not just a documentary of him, right? This is,
That's correct. It's rigorously researched, and every character in it is not just only a real person, but a famous person. So Oppenheimer himself, obviously, was famous. The other physicists involved, such as Edward Teller, who was the prototype for Stanley Kubrick's Dr. Strangelove, Enrico Fermi, but also Albert Einstein and the ex-Nazi rocketeer Werner von Braun are all in there. But it's what we call an alternate history novel. It takes, like The Man in the High Castle, if you've seen that TV series, or the Philip K. Dick book it's based on, it takes it in a different direction. It assumes that Oppenheimer, everything we know about Oppenheimer, every fact that we've ever heard is true. But Oppenheimer himself, and this is really true, intimated that there was a secret behind the Manhattan Project that had never been revealed. And my novel, The Oppenheimer Alternative, tries to figure out what that secret might have been.
is there any way we're going to be able to talk about it without spoiling the whole book?
I think we should try for sure. That's why I'm here. Oppenheimer, uh, it wasn't McCarthy who went after Oppenheimer, but it was in the McCarthy era because Oppenheimer had been uh, a very close fellow traveler with communists. If he had, in fact, denied ever being a member of the Communist Party, but this became a big issue because he was, as I said, the scientific director of what to that point, and probably really in all of American history, was the biggest scientific undertaking ever, bigger than the Apollo moonshot. Uh, he became very much scrutinized for his communist beliefs and lost his security clearance because of that issue. And I wanted to explore what it might have been that he was willing to lose the security clearance over, and rather than give up the truth about to a public, really, evisceration at the hands of a very McCarthy-esque hearing.
Well, was there any evidence that he was selling atomic secrets to the Russians at that time?
No, and I think absolutely the thing about Oppenheimer, and it was so well said by one of his colleagues, I. Rabi, Isidore Isaac Rabi, said the problem with Oppenheimer is he is in a love affair that's unrequited. He loves the United States of America, but they don't love him back. He never, I think, would have betrayed those secrets. Now, it's a fact that there were spies inside the Manhattan Project. Klaus Fuchs is the most famous one. And it's a fact that when the Soviets did get the atomic bomb, they didn't do it by, figuring it out on their own. They did it by stealing the plans from the United States. So there's no question that there was espionage and there were people who were betraying the United States. But Oppie, through and through, despite having been pilloried by the American government and discarded by that government, through and through was an American patriot. I don't think he ever would have, and certainly I don't portray him as having done so in my novel. I don't think he ever would have betrayed the American people.
Okay, I assume he is long passed away now.
He is. He died in 1967. He smoked himself to death. It's as simple as that. He was a chain smoker and just was unable to kick the habit, even though, of course, it was 1963 when the Surgeon General at that time, Luther Terry, came out with the Surgeon General's warning. Oppie simply smoked himself to death. All the other things that could have killed him, including, atomic holocaust, did not, but that horrific habit did.
How old was he when he died?
Oppie was, my goodness, I think he was 62 years old when he died. So a young man, he should have lived much, much longer. In his later years, he had completely switched over to being an advocate for the peaceful uses of nuclear energy. He very much came to regret what had been done with his invention.
So in your book, is the outcome the same in terms of the bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki?
Yes, absolutely. It's and it's funny, not funny. It's tragic, really. You have to mention two cities, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, because Oppenheimer was 100% on board with the need to drop an atomic bomb on Hiroshima. He had his change of heart just a few days later when the second bomb was dropped on Nagasaki. He felt at that point that the demonstration had been done. It had been shown, yes, to the Japanese, but also to the onlooking Soviets, that the United States had a supreme weapon and that there was no point in going up against the United States in any kind of military way because the United States had this weapon. When it was done the second time, he realized that it was going to go too far, that it would escalate, and that nuclear proliferation would be this genie that he had let out of the bottle. And he very much came to regret it, but not until the second bomb was dropped.
What was the time frame between the first and the second drop?
It was less than a week. And it would have been faster except for bad weather over Japan. In fact, Nagasaki was not planned to be the second target. It was a fallback target when bad weather was preventing the dropping on the originally scheduled target. And what happened was that General Groves, who was Oppie's boss, who was the military head of the Manhattan Project, had two bomb designs that Oppie's team had developed. One, we know their names, Fat Man and Little Boy, the two designs. And when the first one when it's tested, that demonstrated atomic superiority on the part of the United States. Groves wanted to test the second one as well to see which one had the bigger effects on a civilian population. Oppie felt the second test was unnecessary, although the two tests, which came in very rapid succession, did prove that both atomic bomb designs were efficacious, that they could, in fact, wreak horrendous destruction on citywide targets.
Why did the U.S. government pick Hiroshima rather than Tokyo?
Stimson, who was the Secretary of War, had previously been an American ambassador to Japan, and he had visited Tokyo, and he had also visited some of the other great cities like Kyoto. And he said Kyoto is too beautiful and Tokyo is too important to the Japanese people. For there to be a post-World War II world order, there had to be some sort of functioning government left behind in Japan. To wipe out Tokyo would have been to wipe out the government. To wipe out Kyoto would have been a not just military blow to the Japanese, but a spiritual blow to them, that he felt there would be no way that there would be a post-World War II. This is Henry Stimson, the Secretary of War, a post-World War II environment in which Japan and the United States could ever be peaceful allies.
So it was out of compassion, in a funny sort of way.
In a perverse kind of way. You're going to kill,
Yeah.
hundreds of thousands of people ultimately, but he chose the hundreds of thousands of people that the Japanese could most easily forgive the killing of in a perverse kind of way and say, okay, you trounced us, you beat us, we're defeated. Let's go on peacefully. Let's find an armistice and go ahead. And ultimately there was, of course, the Japanese surrendered when finally their emperor, Hirohito, said, we're done. We're out of it. It's over. Let's stop this madness.
Yeah, interesting. How did you get interested in Mr. Oppenheimer?
So, it's funny. I was a kid when the $6 Million Man was a TV series.
Oh, I remember
There's
that.
an episode called The Last Kamikaze that aired in 1974. I was 14 years old. And in it, Steve Austin, the American hero, the astronaut, the bionic man, questioned when he met up with a survivor of World War II who thought the war was still waging, a surviving kamikaze. He questioned whether or not the United States ever should have dropped this bomb. And I thought, my God, I'd never heard any American, let alone an American hero, an astronaut, a Superman, questioning the American wisdom of this. And I got fascinated at 14 with the story of J. Robert Oppenheimer and the crisis of conscience around atomic weapons. And ultimately, 40 years later, I came around to write the novel, 50 years later.
I remember that show. It was one of my favorite shows in the 70s. And I loved Steve Austin.
Well, I think all of us who were teenagers at
Yeah.
that time would run in slow motion, in imitation of him. It was a good show, and I have it all on DVD. It survives well today.
I haven't seen any of those shows. The technology doesn't look hokey at this point?
It is of its time. You have
Okay.
to watch, I think, any show that's set in the 70s or read any novel that was written in the 70s as being of its time. So you're looking back at it with nostalgic eyes for sure. But it's still, especially the first two seasons, it got hokier and hokier as Bigfoot and other things showed up later on. But the first two seasons of The $6 Million Man are well worth rewatching today.
Well, I don't remember a lot about the actual storylines, but from what you said about the kamikaze, it sounds like the storylines were pretty good.
They were in the early seasons. I think
Yeah.
in the later seasons, they kind of threw up their hands and became a kiddie show, just another superhero show. But in the early seasons, when they were dealing with what I think is the fundamental question of our age, which is how much of your humanity can you give up to cybernetics, to artificiality, and still retain what it means to be human. I mean, that's the central metaphor. Here's a guy who literally is seeing parts of himself being replaced by machines. And whether we do that literally or just metaphorically, everybody's brain now is enhanced by Google, is enhanced by Wikipedia.
Yeah.
We are, to some degree, cyborgs, cybernetic organisms. And that's the title of the novel by Martin Caidin, upon which the TV series The $6 Million Man was based. Cyborg, C-Y-B-O-R-G, cybernetic organism.
Well, Robert, we do have to wind this down. My guest is Robert J. Sawyer. His latest book, The Oppenheimer Alternative. Is it available now?
Everywhere. Ebook, print, and audiobook. There's a wonderful production on Audible and other places where we make it Audible books. And absolutely in print everywhere.
Okay. Do you have a website you want to give out?
You bet. I'm a science fiction writer, and so my website is sf sfwriter.com. S as in science, F as in fiction, writer.com, sfwriter.com.
Great. Well, thanks for coming back on the show.